When any mind surrenders its identification with its illusions, when it surrenders its identification with its own thoughts, with its own needs, with its own perceived desires, and rests into perfect silence, it rests into the voice for love. And it learns to ask only of that voice, "What would you have me do in this moment?" Hello friends, in this video I'm going to be talking about lesson 11 in the Way of Transformation, and this is book 2 of the Way of Mastery. These books are by John Mark Hammer, or Jayem, and these books are Jesus, or Jeshua ben Joseph, channeled through Jayem. And they reestablish his teachings, and they provide a pathway to enlightenment, or to remembering your connection, your oneness with Spirit, with the Father, with the creative intelligence, or the impulse of love, whatever you wish to call it. The original audio and the transcripts for all these channelings are available for free online at womlibrary.com. Thank you, Jayem, for doing this. Provided it all for free. Really cool. The main idea presented in lesson 11 is to surrender to the will of the Father, or in other words, be silent so that you may hear the voice for love and become a conduit for love. So he begins by saying evolution, or spiritual growth, is meant for you to move more and more away from the noisy small self, with its problems, with its personal desires, what it thinks it needs, what it wants to avoid, and to more and more dissolve into that silent peace so that you're informed by the one mind, and so that you become a transparent conduit for the one mind, for love, for the Father. Because in truth, your identity isn't this small self, which is symbolized by the body. You aren't just this personality, just this body. What you really are is spirit, is the one mind, is love. The great trick of evolution, if you would permit me to use such a term, is to grow the soul's awareness so that it rests in that depth of silence, and yet does not need to withdraw or turn away from the expressions of creation to do so. That is, it need no longer judge the body. It need no longer judge the world that you see around the body. It need no longer strive to ascend to some spiritual height in which all things disappear. But rather, to the contrary, the soul in its maturity, if you will, has ascended into union with the voice for God. That is, it has ascended into the depth of itself. It has learned to stabilize itself in that eternal silence. And it has, through time, experienced that process of transformation in which even the conscious mind is no longer thinking for itself, but is informed from the depth of the true self, the depth of the soul, the voice for love, God itself, Christ itself. So the way of transformation is deliberately deciding to have your perceptions be the same as the perceptions as the one mind, or the mind of God. And thereby that one mind that is always present will inform you in every situation what anything is for, and what you are to do in that situation. So really it reminds me of the idea of you need to become a child, like a child, which is completely dependent on its parent, on the Father, on the Spirit. You're simply surrendering and allowing that one mind to inform you of every single thing to do. So you really have no idea what's going to happen in the future. You are just innocently, peacefully, in silence, and being a conduit. And the love will work through you in situations and use your unique gifts to help others awaken. And therefore we do not deny the dream, deny this illusion experience, but we embrace it, because only love heals. So anything you deny, you're giving actually strength, which you resist persists. So you must love it and embrace it. When any mind then truly awakens, it no longer sees specialness in the world at all. Each moment is merely sacrificed or surrendered into what I once called the will of my Father. And what is that will? The impetus of love. How can love operate so that it brings awakening to the minds involved? That is indeed a purely creative process, and is the only true value time can have. The awakened mind then has no idea one day to the next what love will ask it to do, how love is to be expressed through it. The awakened mind knows that it is not the maker or the doer, and merely asks in every moment, "What would you have me do?" And he says when we are awakened, when we do become awakened, we will still do what bodies need to do, right? We'll sleep, we'll be hungry, we need to eat. When we're cold, we'll put on another jacket. But within, it'll be very different. We're not operating from this motivation from the ego. We will not operate from such thoughts as, How can I get more? How can I avoid a certain experience or feeling? How can I make myself comfortable? How can I get others' approval? How can I be acknowledged as a great master? And all of the rest. None of that runs that awakened mind. Each context, then, is surrendered within the mind itself over into the will of love. And that mind, through the personality, through the body structure, while the body lasts, becomes a conduit that serves the voice for love. And he says, as you become a conduit for this love, that you may not be acknowledged by the world, by others. You may not be approved. You may not be accepted. But he says that's okay, because what is it to be accepted by an insane world? And what reward is it to be acknowledged by the insane, dwelling in illusion? Can an illusion truly acknowledge the worthiness of the Son of God? The way of transformation, then, is not the gaining of power. It is the release of all illusion. It is the willingness to release the grip that you have had upon the shadows that your mind has made up as a substitute for the truth of your only reality. The process, then, of the way of transformation is that process in which you begin to use the mind quite deliberately in a different way. And as the knowledge of yourself deepens, as you get to know this personality structure and the body, it doesn't go away, it doesn't disappear, it just becomes transparent so that the love can shine through it, the light can shine through it. The value you've put on them has been given up and given over to love, to the voice for love. And when this happens, things in your life begin to change, like your career, your relationships, because your very motivation for life has completely changed. The very meaning and purpose of existence has changed. In the initial stages, as this process is occurring, this can indeed elicit fear, a sense of disorientation, a sense of self-doubt. All of these things must be embraced with faith, and faith is, indeed, the substance of things unseen. Love isn't quite settled in perfectly yet, and the mind is still gripping, somewhat, the things and the ways of the world. And yet a deeper voice is compelling the self to release old values, to release old careers, old relationships, old clothing, old furniture. Everything begins to change, and it feels as though loss is being experienced. And yet, what is loss in the world is gain in the kingdom. For what can be gained but the reawakening to the simplicity of the truth? I am God's. I belong not to the world. I and my Father are one. Well, since I still find myself in this world, how can I dedicate this bag of dust and its attendant personality and emotions to the voice for love? And that becomes the sole purpose. We could say both the only as soul and the soul as the essence of your being. The sole purpose becomes a willingness to allow love to inform each moment. And he says an awakened one becomes a perfect servant in each moment to see how it could help, how it can be a conduit, how it can serve the voice for love. And the time and the world have no value or purpose other than this, other than what the Holy Spirit would give it. And then he shares an interesting idea, which is when you more and more surrender into the voice for love and become that clear channel or conduit, you need to be even more vigilant because you gain more power, more access to more real power. Then he goes on to this idea of time must be used differently than we're used to, and that each moment should be seized. Each moment is precious and should be used for this purpose of serving the will of the Father or serving the voice for love. And wherever you're at currently, no matter the circumstances, is a perfect context for this to happen. All you must do is decide to use time differently. Make that shift of allegiance from the small self and its fears to the true self, the one in all things, and its love. Time then must be seized and seen to be of great value, that each and every moment is not a mistake. There's nothing idle about it. And you are the one who is free to use the moment to be informed by the voice for love, to learn ever more deeply to surrender the value of fear, safety, personal survival, and all of the rest, and to dissolve through faith into the voice for love. From this moment, decide to see time differently, to seize the opportunity to train the mind to be vigilant and aware. Seeing and using time differently leads you into a different state of being. A different state of being which can be described as, I am the Christ. There is only that one. and I am dissolved in and as that one. Call me not great, for only God is worthy of awe. That which I do not of myself, but the Father does these things through me. I am one who merely loves love so deeply that I am willing to surrender all things that I once knew to be myself. That my true self, who is Christ, informs my every decision, my every gesture, my every extension of the good, the holy, and the beautiful. And then he makes a pretty funny comment where he says, this is pretty heavy stuff, isn't it? And he says, it seems heavy because it is heavy from the point of view of the ego. It is heavy to the ego. And then he compares the ego to a gnat, and this all being like a heavy weight that is put on top of the gnat and squishes it. And he also compares it to bringing the sun down to the surface of the earth, what would happen to the earth. And he says this is all meant to let the ego dissolve into light, into your true self. And then he goes on to say, as you begin to awaken, you'll begin to laugh a lot. The mind will begin to laugh at itself because you'll see all this drama, all these stories, all these diseases, all these relationships, all these problems that you had in past lives. It was just a funny game, just silly things that we tried to create all in an attempt to be something other than God. And it'll seem suddenly very comical. And you will laugh at the echoes from previous ideas like this coming back to you. You'll just laugh as they dissolve away. The trick of healing and awakening is to come to see the neutrality of all energy, so that you can choose to inform it with the value that the Holy Spirit would give it. Then time becomes sacred. It becomes eternal. It becomes a tool for love. Even the body becomes a tool that love uses to bring about healing. What other purpose could a body hope to have? And then he says, don't look up to him as some great master, because he reminds us that he too had teachers that were teaching him just as he is teaching us right now. That were teaching him to have different thoughts, to drop different pebbles into that pond, to send out different ripples. And then he shares an exercise, as he usually does in these lessons. In each of your next 7 days, as often as you remember to do so, and remember, you will only remember what you choose to value. As often as you remember, decide to see time differently and to acknowledge that you are a disciple of the mind of Christ. And nothing matters to you than the simplicity of allowing the dissolution of illusion so that Christ can come and live where once the ego dwelt in authority. A simple exercise. And if a day goes by in which you forget, it can only be because in that day you have valued something else. It seems like he's getting more and more firm in his lessons as the lessons go on. But man, this was a good one. Again, these are all available free online at womlibrary.com. And check out the next lesson, lesson 12, the last lesson in this book. Thank you.